if we make the best use of artificial intelligence, that it will completely transform the way that we build software, and we'll finally be able to build all the software that we've wanted to build. And, it'll be a completely different world at that.
Work is changing quickly, irreversibly, and often invisibly. I'm Chris Fanchi, and this show is about understanding where it's headed and how we stay human in the process. Hello and welcome to Human Work After AI, the show where we explore the future of work, technology, and what it means to stay human in the age of AI. We're speaking with founders, technologists, and thinkers who are navigating the shift toward an AI-powered economy. Today's guest is Noel Wilson, founder of Intelligenic, a platform that uses AI to automate the entire software development lifecycle, from discovery and design to code generation, QA, and deployment. With a background spanning over 2 decades in consulting and enterprise software, Noel is now on a mission to fix what he calls the multi-trillion-dollar inefficiency in how software is still being built. Noel, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Chris. Happy to be here and excited to talk to you today.
It's great to have you. So I always like to start with my guest's origin story. You've been in tech for a long time. How did that journey first begin? What first got you interested in technology?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a bit lately. Definitely was part of the culture that I grew up in. I grew up in San Jose, right in the middle of Silicon Valley. My mom worked in high tech. My relatives worked in high tech. Most of our neighbors worked in high tech in some fashion. I think I was one of the first kids on the block to get like an IBM PC, and start to use that. But from my perspective as a kid, though, I was playing games and things like that. Because I thought it was like normal to have this stuff. It was just kind of everywhere. And as I went through school, you got some exposure to doing some computer programming. In fact, I think the first program that I wrote was like in junior high school or something like that. And I printed out the theme song to the Brady Bunch. That tells you how old I am. Like that was still on TV, albeit in reruns. I didn't see it when it originally came out. So computers were always a thing for me, and technology was always a thing. But I didn't expect when I was growing up that I was going to go into it. I didn't really know what it really meant. It's just kind of part of the world. But then as I got into university and I started to get through my studies, it just became very clear to me that technology was really the key to the future. And I needed to learn more about it. I needed to figure out how I can apply that and turn that into a vocation, my career and everything. And so I decided to get pretty focused on that and studied decision and information sciences at Santa Clara University, which was a combination of business as well as computer science. Because I realized like just computers on their own, they do cool stuff, but you got to really apply it to some sort of business use case, that sort of concept. So I married the two together when I was going through my studies. And then immediately after school, I ended up getting my first job, which was with a company called Anderson Consulting. Again, I'm dating myself again here. Company doesn't exist. You all probably know it as Accenture now, but it used to be called Anderson Consulting back in the 90s. And for me, it was just perfect mix using technology to solve problems. Like I never envisioned myself as the type of engineer that would just be comfortable sitting at my keyboard writing code without having a better and greater context of the true problem that I was solving and dealing with the people's true issues. So again, consulting for me was the perfect marriage where I would get that opportunity to work directly with the individuals that had problems and the organizations that had problems and apply technology to it. And that had been pretty much the situation throughout all my career. So I continued to progress, through as a consultant, using technology, using software to solve all of these problems. What I discovered through my journey is that while we're busy solving these problems, we weren't really taking the time to look at our own problems that we had in developing software. And there's many. There's a lot of challenges, and it hasn't really changed in the entire time that I've been doing this for over 28 years. First and foremost, there just aren't enough qualified people to meet the demand for all the software that we're being asked to build. When we do have people working on building software, it tends to be a highly manual process, which is pretty surprising when you think about the high tech nature of what we're building, we're not really taking advantage of a lot of the solutions that we created ourselves. There's plenty of automation out there. And certainly with the emergence of AI, there's an opportunity to use that to help us get better. I'm not saying we're not doing that. It's just we're not taking full advantage of it. It's still the case today. And as a result of these inefficiencies, it typically leads to incredibly high costs because it's taking us far too long to complete what we set out to build. And oftentimes we don't do it with the best quality. So that creates problems in and of itself because we're not meeting the stakeholders' needs. The system doesn't actually do what we expected it to do. And then once it's actually in place, we're dealing with those quality issues. And that costs money to be able to deal with that, to manage that. So it's a combination of all these things, not having enough people, taking too long to build these solutions, not really creating the highest quality solutions. And then when you do, trying to manage them when they're in place. That's where you get to this multi-trillion-dollar problem every year. I recognize that while as a consultant, I was addressing many of these issues, I wasn't really solving the root cause. It was more of a band-aid. So it was great. That meant that my clients would always come to me and need help, which was fantastic, but I wasn't truly dealing with the ultimate problem that we all had, right? Those inefficiencies. So I needed to do something different. And that's when I formed the company Intelligenic, where we're taking advantage of AI to build a platform that will automate all facets of the software development lifecycle, improving efficiencies in how you build that software, reducing the time required to do it, and ultimately also improving the quality of what gets produced.
So, did you always want to be an entrepreneur? It sounds like you went in with a business mindset, but not necessarily looking to start your own business. Was being entrepreneur or running your own business something that you had always thought about?
I think it had always been in the back of my mind, but it wasn't something that I was leading with or certainly prepared to move forward with. It's interesting. I've also been thinking about this a bit. Like, how did I get myself to the point where I took that step to be an entrepreneur? I think I was a product of pretty traditional worldwide culture that when you're brought up, you're taught to, you know, get educated. And as a result of getting educated, you can find that vocation that best suits you and then go work for somebody that you will give you a job so that you can then provide for yourself and for your family. And that's the path that you take. There aren't a lot of programs, and I don't think there's a whole lot of cultural support around entrepreneurialism, and
Mm.
fostering, what it takes to be a founder to go start your own company. Interestingly enough, if you think about what the United States and America is based on. I mean, it's based on entrepreneurialism and founders, but I think we've kind of gone away from that for some reason in the last
Mm.
100 years or so, where it's like it's about it'd be great if you could do that, but you need to figure that out. That's not something we teach you how to do, but you need to go this path and get educated and go work for somebody to get a job. But in the back of my mind, even though I was going through all of that, I was like, God, wouldn't it be great, to have my own company? And I had many instances throughout my career when I was thinking about the possibilities of doing that. But, that fear and uncertainty that all founders face when you're about to take that step, that was very prevalent. Can I do it? Is it, who am I to say that I'm the guy to go start this company, right? But once you finally realize it, and this definitely happened for me, I was like, well, why not me? Like, I got great ideas. I think this is the right thing to do. And then once I just got over that and I took this first step, because that's the biggest thing. Like, starting a company is a lot like looking into this abyss. You can't see the bottom. And then taking a chance on yourself that if I take a step out there, I'll find a foothold. And then slowly but surely, I'll find another one and I'll start to cross that abyss. And that's effectively what I did. I just believed in myself. I took the step and I started, that journey. And, what I found out was as scary as it was to start, once I took that first step, I was like, oh, wow, okay, I can do this. Let me see what happens when I take the second step and the third one and so forth.
So, was there something that happened, some moment within your career or the development of the current technology that made you feel like this is the time? Now is the time to make that leap?
I don't think there was one moment. I think it was a collection of many moments. And it had been something that had been culminating for quite some time. Quite frankly, had I taken the steps to start a company earlier in my career, I probably wasn't ready. I probably was going to make all kinds of mistakes. Not to say I don't now, but I think I'm more prepared now than I was early on. But towards the foundation of Intelligenic, I really was thinking about it a lot. I was thinking about how might I do things differently? How might I take the things that I've learned and all the good things that I had experienced and been able to be a part of in many of the organizations that I'd worked at and apply them to the company that I was going to build. And then also avoid some of the pitfalls for some of the things that I saw were obviously just not the best way of being able to do things and improve upon those things. And so when I was at my last employer, like leading up to the conclusion of that relationship, I was thinking a lot like, well, what would be the next step? And it just became clear to me that I needed to do something that was mine, that I was going to build, that I would be solely responsible for. And it would be something different because, quite frankly, I'd always been in consulting through most of my career, starting at Anderson Consulting, Accenture, and so forth, all the way through every single company that I'd worked with. I needed to determine whether I was going to do that. Was I going to go be a consultant or was I going to go create this product company? And that was one of the first decisions I needed to make when I formed Intelligenics. Like, what was Intelligenic going to be? It was pretty close to being a consulting company at one point, but I pivoted pretty fast because I realized that I wouldn't be able to focus on dealing with the true problem, which was that, consulting's great. It definitely solves it, but it doesn't deal with the fact that there's still all these inefficiencies that we can fix. And I knew I wanted to invest in building the platform to do that rather than providing the services to address that problem.
So talk a little bit about the platform then. How did you decide to approach this problem? I'm sure your consulting brain came at it that way, but talk a little bit about how you decided how to first address it and what areas that you thought were the highest priorities to figure out of the gate.
Yeah. The first thing I needed to do was gather as much information as possible in research. I've observed many founders that I know that have led with building the solution first and then trying to find the users and the problem that you're going to deal with. It's kind of the field of dreams analogy, build it and they will come. That never works in business. It really doesn't. It only works in movies. And so I wanted to avoid that. And so before I put, any hands on keyboards or had anybody put hands on keyboards, I went out and talked to as many people as I possibly could about the concept, about what we were trying to accomplish, just to see if there was something there, and to really start to get some sort of feedback on it. And as I progressed, I found that there was a lot of support. The people recognized that yes, all those problems that you highlighted, exactly what we experience every day. And if you can build some sort of a platform that will help us address this, you've got something, you know. And so once I got that feedback, and I talked to hundreds of people before I even started, to get that feedback to really make sure that I was heading in the right direction. Once I got that feedback, I created an initial prototype so that I could demonstrate more concretely what the concept was. Because one thing to talk about it, it's just a little too ethereal for most people. They're like, yeah, I kind of get it. Everybody has their own perceptions of what it could possibly be. And so creating that prototype allowed me then to go share that with a subset of that original group to really get some meaningful, concrete feedback on what we had in mind. And it also helped guide us in determining what we should build, what features we should focus on, what things that may not be very useful are, what sorts of user experiences might be important, all the while continuing to validate not only the concept, but like certain aspects of the product. And quite frankly, that original prototype that we created, well over a year ago now, some of the elements, I mean, it's changed a lot for what we've launched this week, but some of at least the initial concepts have still remained, and how we would dynamically produce content that people that are involved in the software development lifecycle would typically have to manually create on their own. That's core to what we do today. That's not really changed, but there's a lot of other things that we've done that has been guided by a lot of that early feedback. It's so crucial to do that. As an entrepreneur, you need to validate your concept. I mean, it's one thing to go build something. Don't spend too much time on it. It's just create that prototype, however you do it. Just make it as swiftly as you can so you can start getting feedback immediately. But you need to get that feedback. Creating it in a vacuum, it's not going to go anywhere with that. It's very rare that occurs. And so that was key to what I did to get us to where we are now, where we've actually launched the product. And now we're essentially reiterating that same process. So now that I've got a product in market, I'm now sharing it with many of the people that I originally shared it with to get even more feedback. Okay, we took your feedback, now we've built it. This is like a real working solution. Tell us what you think, and so that we can continue to course correct, right? The way I always like to explain product development to people that aren't involved in software product development, there's no such thing as done. You're never done, right? You build it and you get that feedback and you continue to tailor it. You continue to modify and make it your own.
Hmm.
And quite frankly, I don't know if you ever find product market fit. I mean, I think you get to the point where people start paying for it, which is kind of the definition of product market fit.
Yeah.
But I think you're always evolving because that product market fit is one of these things where it's not a destination. It's absolutely a journey, right? And you get to
Right.
milestones in that journey where you can commercialize it and turn it into a real business, but you need to continue to look for the changes in the market and adapt your product to fit that. And we're going to continue to, embrace that mindset in the way that we develop our product, get feedback, and continue to adjust.
So let's dive into, I guess, kind of the elephant in the room, the AI.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, you're started working on this product not too long ago, just in the last few years, right? And the AI has really advanced, even just in the last year or two. But talk about how AI has played a role in building the software yourself, how it's playing a role within the software, and whether you feel like your solution that you're building today would have even been possible before the most recent technologies, particularly the generative AI of the last few years.
Yeah, and certainly the advances that have occurred with the current state of the large language models, I don't think it would have been possible to produce what we're producing right now. And so really that's just in the last, I don't know, 3 to 5 years or so, where we've got to the point where you can actually create truly generative AI solutions, right? Let me start with like, how do we use it? Like, we definitely drink our own champagne, so we recognize that, you know, there's going to be value to our customers for what we're producing, so we need to embrace that ourselves. So everybody on our team uses AI in some fashion to get their jobs done. I personally, content marketing, huge believer in content marketing to produce our product. Like, I leverage that as much as I can to help me create it because I'm, very lean team. We got 6 people working on this stuff. I don't have a team of marketeers and everybody that's writing all this content, but I have the ideas so I can, provide that to the model, and then it produces amazing content that I can use to promote what we're doing. Our engineers, it is mandatory. In fact, I talked to them about this like during our startups. Not only are they supposed to talk about stand-up, sorry, not only are they supposed to talk about what it is that they're working on, any blockers that might happen, and like share an experience of how you've used AI to solve a problem, right? And so it's what we do on a day-to-day basis. Gets us started, gets us to a point where, if we're stuck, it also has become this method to be able to answer questions for us, that sort of thing. So it's pretty prevalent throughout everything that we do. We fully embraced it. It's made it possible for me to build the company to where it's at and develop our code and our product to where it's at with a very lean team. Like,
Mm.
I think back, when I started my career and I would be building just these applications and the underlying infrastructure, it was big teams, lots of stuff that I went into that, and it took a long time. There's no way that you could be able to be as successful with such a small team to build what we're doing today. So that's one thing. What do we do that's going to help people facilitate that? Like I mentioned before, core to what we do is that we dynamically produce software development lifecycle content that would typically require the end user to manually create on their own, right? So if you think about like when you're going through a discovery process to determine what you want to build, you typically end up writing like a product requirements definition, which describes all the requirements and everything that goes into that. Well, we dynamically create that for you based on inputs that you've provided, and a combination of our, you know, global knowledge base, which has best practices and great content on how to produce those sorts of things. And then the model
Mm.
produces this amazing output as a result. We also produce things like the high fidelity screens or the mock-ups. We also produce code. the test scripts that would be consumed by a test automation framework, you name it. There's a whole litany of things that have to get produced beyond just code itself. So that's core to what we do. What enables that, as I mentioned before, is we have this global knowledge base that is based on what we believe are the best practices and the best types of content for certain types of outputs that we can produce in our system. And it only gets better through the ongoing usage of our platform by our customers. So we accumulate that information and that data, and we combine that with our data set so that the future customers get even better information at their disposal to produce these amazing work products, the output that comes from our system. And so over time, collectively, it becomes this incredible corpus of SDLC information that no one really will have available to outside of working through Intelligenic. And then our ability to be able to address it comprehensively is another thing that our users benefit from, because a lot of these solutions in the market today, they're point solutions. It's going to help me generate code, or it's going to help me maybe create some of these design things. But you don't really have this one framework that brings it all together. So we're unifying the whole process so that it's one stop. It truly does take you from 0 to 1. And then lastly, because we know that people are using many tools to help them with their software development lifecycle activities, we will integrate with those tools and orchestrate the operation of them so that content that we dynamically produce can be produced within those tools. So if they're more comfortable using the tools like Jira, Figma, VS Code, you name it, that's fine. We have no problem with that. We just want to make it that much easier for you to get to that starting point so you can get closer to 1, right? So that's kind of the way I view, that's really what we do, to use AI to make us successful at building our product. And that's how we're using AI in our platform to make our end users that much more successful at completing the activities that they have to complete on a day-to-day basis.
So what is your vision for adoption of your product? Do you see this replacing traditional consulting engagements? Do you see this as being a tool for startups to build something brand new? Is this something that larger organizations or enterprises could use to modernize some of their technology and their software?
Yeah, all of the above. So but I don't view it as, it's not like it's replacing people. I don't look at it that way. You get a lot of media coverage. There's a lot of pundits that are like, oh my word, it's this existential threat to humanity. It's going to replace everything that we do. I think it's quite the opposite. In fact, I think it's going to be the greatest enabler that humanity has ever seen. It is an amazing force multiplier. And if anything, it's just going to augment what we do. So each of those examples that you shared, you think about consultants. What are they trying to do? They're trying to help their clients build software solutions like this, because their clients might not have the expertise, and nor do they have the capacity to make it happen. Well, the reality is, in many cases, the consultants also don't have all the expertise that they need or the capacity to make it happen. So this enables them to be more successful at helping their clients, because they'll be able to deliver more of that work for their clients in much less time, with much more confidence that it's at the highest quality that it could possibly be. Now, I know that many of my colleagues in consulting would get worried and might feel threatened by that, because how does that impact my billing hours? Because what you're saying is I could do more of the work in less time, which means I'm billing less. While that might be true on an individual case-by-case basis, the reality is these consulting firms have plenty of clients that they can't get to. Now, wouldn't that be a powerful thing if all of a sudden, instead of servicing just this one client, you could service 10? Right? So that's the value from a consulting perspective. From a startup perspective, I know this, I live and breathe this. I don't nearly have enough people to be able to get everything done that I need to. So this has become a force multiplier for me to be able to get more work done with fewer resources, and certainly for fewer capital, economic resources as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then enterprises, it's the same challenge. It's just not having enough capacity to get the software built that you really want to get built, and not having the expertise to be able to create some of those solutions. So our platform then offers a solution to be able to solve that problem for them as well. Same team. Now suddenly that team has much more capacity because it's accelerated their ability to deliver on these software projects. And by virtue of the data that we provide to them, their expertise, has gotten, demonstrably greater than it was before.
So you've done a lot of interviews leading up to this, learning about the needs in the industry. What is the feeling around a tool like yours and around AI coding in general? Is there a hunger to adopt it? And how does that compare when you're talking to someone that's working in a big enterprise versus someone that's a startup or a small business? I would imagine, is much more open to innovative solutions because of limitations on resources. Whereas the enterprise, you got to protect your existing
Yeah.
IPs and data and all this other stuff. So, what kind of feedback have you heard around AI use in software development?
Sure. Yeah. And I've talked to people in enterprise organizations, talked to people in mid-size, I've talked to people that are individual contributors. So I've gotten a wide range of feedback, and you're spot on. Like the feedback, I would say at a macro level is similar, but some of the nuances are different based on their particular situation. Individual contributors, smaller companies love getting access to a platform like this that will help accelerate their ability and just basically make them more productive. You're seeing more and more of this these days where there's just these incredibly lean organizations. I've done some research that indicates that typical startups, the resources required to build it has been reduced dramatically over the last 10 years because of these tools that we now have available. In fact, I haven't seen it quite yet, but I have a feeling these are questions that are going to be asked of me when I go through my fundraising that's coming up soon. What's your team size? Why is that in your team size? What's your plan for the future? I mean, I know they're going to ask me those questions, but I think I already know that they have an answer in mind of like they want to see it remain as lean as possible for as long as possible, right? You want to conserve capital.
Mm.
Now, with that said, that same premise, you want to reserve capital and get more from your capital that you're deploying, is consistent throughout any organization, whether you're for a for-profit organization or a public organization like a government organization or something like that. You have limited capital. It's just finite. This is all there is to it. Enterprise, for sure. You know, there's a desire to be able to take advantage of the benefits, but while protecting the intellectual property that they have. But that's the same case, I would say, with small companies. I don't know that's really that much different, right? Probably the enterprise companies are more advanced in their understanding of the importance of it and their ability to protect it. So they want to make sure that you match that. And so you just have to be very cognizant of the type of organization that you're working with when you start to offer your solution so that you can address the needs of all of them. With that said, our focus right now, our ideal customer profile is a mid-size to enterprise scale technology organization. I think you brought up, technology organizations are more willing to adapt earlier stage technologies. That was not lost on me when I decided that we should focus on that particular
Mm.
industry because of those reasons, that we would get faster traction in being able to get our solution adopted in much greater interest. Now, that said, though, there's plenty of enterprise organizations that see the value as well. They tend to be slower to adopt, and I get that. Just longer time cycles to get them comfortable with what you're offering, and then get to the point where they're ready to start to implement and use it.
So, what have you come up with in terms of a go-to-market motion? How are you looking to get into some of these organizations and present your solution, especially given that there are these other solutions that we previously talked about that can do some of the things that your product can do?
Yeah, definitely. Very time appropriate for me because we've got our product in market now and we are starting to, pretty aggressively approach it. The strategy that I've employed so far has been very much a direct marketing strategy. So what I mean by that is that we've identified target customers that fit that ICP and the key user personas that we need to also be targeting within those ICPs, right? And we've tailored our message appropriately for that. That's key. Like whenever you're doing any sort of marketing strategy, you want to make sure that your message is going to resonate best with your ICP and those core users, right? So that's what we've been focusing our efforts on. As far as the tactical execution of that to enable that direct strategy, LinkedIn has been an amazing asset for us as a social platform. It's really the de facto business networking platform. While it
Mm.
started off more as like a a connection mechanism to meet people in your industries, it's absolutely become more and more acceptable to promote your products in LinkedIn. And we fully embrace that. So we've put a lot of resource investment into getting as many users as we possibly can that are following the company on LinkedIn. So we now have almost 7,000 followers of the company on LinkedIn, all of which fit the user personas that would be interested in our product. It's a wide range on the ICP, so a lot of industry verticals, but that's fine because like long term, I do believe that our platform will fit any industry and any software solution. So it's not a bad thing that we've got that. But we also have the core ICP, for us, which is mid-sized enterprise organization that's technology building custom software, right? And with that group, then what we've done is we've reached out to every single one of those followers to ask them if they would like to learn more about our product and use it to build a waiting list. A key for any startup, get that waiting list started as soon as possible. Try to make that waiting list, create it though close to when you're going to release your product. That's been one of the struggles we've had because I started it last year and it's taken us a little longer to get to the point where we're ready to share it. So you get some diminishing returns for the length of time that people run on Windows. But nevertheless, it's good to get started with that. It's one of those validating points that helps you understand whether you're approaching product market fit. In lieu of having revenue that's being generated or a product in market, that sort of interest helps you understand there's still something there and I need to continue to move forward. But we're now, so we've proven that works. We've been able to get almost 1,000 people on that waiting list. So I know that strategy is successful. And our plan is to continue to use that in the short run as part of our direct marketing and expand that to other groups on LinkedIn that fit our ideal customer profile and fit within the user personas, and to continue to build that interest in our product and get them to the point where they start to try it, get on a waiting list, or get to the point where they come and register and try it and get them going. Longer term, I definitely want to explore more indirect marketing, so ad-based, interest-driven types of things to get more people so that it's not as resource intensive because it takes people to do this. And that when I say people, it's me because the team is small, but over time it's like I would have to get more me's to go do that. And so if I could somehow, make better use of resource, so not have as many sales oriented people, then to get more inbound traffic to start to demonstrate some interest and want to use our product, that's always a good thing to do. But to start, direct marketing is key. That's the advice I give to every entrepreneur I talk to. It's like, you got to get out there, man. I was talking to one guy recently, and I could tell he was a little bit on the shy side. He was all about building a solution. Brilliant. And I'm like, you got to go talk to people about this thing. You got to go to networking. You said your wife's going to this networking thing tonight. Go with her. And just talk to one person. That's your assignment. That's the only way you make these things successful because you haven't built a brand. Nobody knows to go look for Intelligenic. I have to reach out and bring people in.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Kind of the build in public philosophy, if you're familiar with that.
Yeah.
So how do you see solutions like yours changing the roles of software engineer within an organization? And one of the big concerns that I've heard frequently when talking to people in this space is the idea that the AI is essentially taking over the role of the junior engineer and kind of closing off that entryway for new engineers to get into the industry. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I've heard that too. And you certainly see, I haven't seen like true statistics that backs that up. It's been more anecdotal information, right? I would say that it is just as likely that it's going to better enable those more junior people to be more successful, for all the reasons that I mentioned before. They don't have the expertise yet, and because they don't have that expertise, they may not be as good as what they're going to potentially be in the future. So they're going to be slower at being able to build these things. But if you were to equip them with a platform that gives them access to an amazing corpus of software development lifecycle information that they couldn't have learned in school because it's pretty academic, it's not about real world, implementation. That changes how productive they can be, right? So I think it's just as likely that the less experienced individuals will benefit from this and actually be more productive. They just have to embrace it. They got to use it, and find the right organizations that are going to give them access to those tools. As far as how it's going to change others that are involved in the software development lifecycle, I firm believer that it's going to be an enabler. If you think about it, the way things have been up until now is that people specialize in certain activities associated with the SDLC. If you're an engineer, you write code. That's what you do, right? And most of the engineers that I know aren't really interested in all of that discovery and design stuff unless it's technically oriented. But if you were to give them a platform that would help them be successful at getting some of that work done, that would be incredible because it's not something that they necessarily want to do, but to give them the mechanism, the ability to understand what needs to get done, number one, and then how to do it, that's a pretty powerful thing and just makes them more effective at what they do. Same thing can be said about like product managers and designers. They're very
Yeah.
focused on their activities. This now gives them a platform that creates greater visibility in what goes into everything else that needs to get created and gives them the ability to participate at a much higher level than they ever would have before. I'm not saying it's going to necessarily give them that same expertise that the individual that's actually responsible for the work, but at least it gives them greater appreciation and it starts to bring these organizations together. Because in my experience, what causes like software development initiatives to fail is because the stakeholders aren't aligned. They're trying to do
Yeah.
different things like this. So if you can bring them closer together and create greater alignment, it's just going to mean greater success for the organization as a whole.
So I'm going to let you out of here on this one. You've talked about the multi-trillion-dollar inefficiency in software. If Intelligenic succeeds, what does the world look like in 5 years? How does that change the way software is developed and the way the world looks with an abundance of new software being introduced?
Yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot as well. And when I think about like the biggest part of the multi-trillion dollar problem is that it's the lost opportunity for the software that you just never built because it was too complex. It was, cost too much. You didn't have an understanding of the real stakeholder requirements. So with Intelligenic and with whatever your choice of AI is that helps you with that, I think it just makes us that much better to finally meet the true demand for all of the software that we're being asked to build. I really think like software engineering and the whole process, let's just call it an industry, it's at a bit of a tipping point. And when I look at similar instances throughout history, the one that comes to mind for me is the auto manufacturing industry back when cars were new. So think about this. This is like, early 90s. We just started to create these cars. People are just starting to drive them. But at the same time, people were still riding horses, taking trains, and walking, you know. But there was still growing popularity and like this is awesome, this is great, I don't need a horse, and I can drive this anywhere and I can go faster and all this stuff. But it was hard to build these things and it took a long time to build these things until Henry Ford recognized that there was massive popularity in these cars and recognized that he needed to figure out a way to build more of these things. And so he introduced the concept of the moving assembly line to auto manufacturing. When he did, it completely transformed Ford's business. He was able to produce like 90 million Model Ts, in just a matter of, much shorter period of time than ever would have been before. And as a result, it changed not only Ford's business, but the industry as a whole and transportation as a whole. Because now people have all these cars that they could utilize to stop walking, stop taking the train, stop riding their horses, and everybody else in the industry followed suit. And by the way, all the other people that were optimizing around non-automobile transportation had to adapt or went out of business. Like, how many blacksmiths do you know anymore? How many buggy whip manufacturers do you know anymore? So I really view we're at that same point in time that if we make the best use of artificial intelligence, that it will completely transform the way that we build software, and we'll finally be able to build all the software that we've wanted to build. And it'll be a completely different world at that point.
Great, great. So Thank you so much, Noel, for coming on the show. This has been a great conversation. Where can people find you and learn more about Intelligenic?
Yeah, thank you. It's been amazing. Well, for me, I really enjoyed the conversation. You can find me at intelligenic.ai. We also are on LinkedIn. Look for Intelligenic there, and you can find me there. I'm also very active on LinkedIn, as I mentioned earlier, and I'm looking forward to anyone that's interested in learning more about us and happy to share more about Intelligenic as well.
Great. And to all our listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, please share. Be sure to follow Human Work After AI and leave us a review. And as always, stay human. Thank you for listening to this episode of Human Work After AI. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast provider so you never miss an episode, and we'll see you next time.